Hello, I think we are live. I think we are live. I think that's it. Tell us in the chat if we're not live. Um, I guess if we're not live, they won't know how to tell us in. Well, it'll all work out. Hello,
It's working.
everyone. Hello, everyone. This is the
Hello.
IndieCade Beyond Screens Alternative Controller Show. I'm Alistair Aitcheson, and with me is my co-host Tatiana. Hello, Tatiana. How are you
Hi.
doing?
Well, good as usual. You?
Yeah, doing well. It's been a busy day. Excited for the upcoming show. The Beyond Screens Alternative Controller Show is a show where we bring on a couple of guests from the world of alternative controllers games and interview them, ask them about their work. Now, these are games that are made using strange, weird, and wonderful contraptions, maybe repurposing household objects, or maybe programming new controllers and interfaces using Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, and things like that. And with us this week are two creators who have flown in all the way from Melbourne in Australia to come and join us. So we'll be welcoming them on soon. They are Chad Toprak, who is a designer and the curator of Free Play, which is one of Australia's biggest and longest running gaming festivals.
Director. Even the
Director,
director.
apologies, director. And Helen Kwok. Helen Kwok is a game creator and
Multimedia artist.
yes,
She's making wonderful games, and they are working together for the past. They've been working together for the past years on wonderful games. Maybe we can directly show you their last, not game, but games, which are urban outdoor games that they did quite recently, a few months ago, not maybe even just a few weeks ago. These are called street tape games. And I guess without further ado, we can show you a 2 minutes long video of Helen talking about it before welcoming our guests.
All right, so I'm queuing it up now, and here is Helen Kwok talking about street tape games.
Tape games is a temporary installation that uses social distancing tapes to create playful markings, boundaries, and patterns on the ground. These markings create a play space that the public can use to play a series of redesigned street games that incorporate social distancing as a part of their gameplay. So street tape games was very much a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic, in particular, all the social distancing tapes that we saw emerging in public spaces. Looking at these different colored tapes, rather than kind of being put off by them, they actually reminded us of game spaces and playground markings on the ground. And we thought, well, rather than kind of using these tapes as a tool to isolate people and keep people apart, we thought, why not use them to bring people together instead through play? So we decided to create street tape games as a way to encourage people to come outside and play again after lockdown. And this is a photo of the final play space design, where every yellow dot that you see in the play space is 1.5 meters apart, which is the distance implemented by the Australian government for COVID safety. People would kind of use these tapes on the ground to play a series of street and playground games that we've redesigned to incorporate social distancing. And through facilitated play sessions, we guide the participants through each of these games, for example, with tape statues, which was inspired by What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, statues and touch color. Rather than getting the players to tag each other, players have to kind of freeze on certain colored tapes. Or, for example, verbal tunnel ball, where rather than passing a ball down the line of players, the teams of players have to memorize and pass on these silly verbal cues to one another, standing 1.5 meters apart.
So that is Street Tape Games, and we are about to bring its creators into the room right now. Lovely audience of the Beyond Screens show. We bring you Chad Toprak and Helen Kwok. Big round of applause.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. How are you? It's 5 a.m. for you, right?
It is 5 a.m.
Thanks so much for waking up that early for us. It's so nice to have you. And without further ado, let's directly go into the first part of this show, the interview. So we briefed you a bit about this, so it won't come as a surprise, but we try to come up with some surprise sometimes. Let's start with Helen. So before entering into strip tape games, you have years of work behind you. So quick note, you are a cellist, right? Am I? Yeah.
I am.
Okay, I have a strong obsession with cello, like I have a cello kink of some sort. So any cellist in this on this planet wins my heart directly. I just wanted you to know this. But that's not related to ALT control yet, maybe one day. So it's interesting. So when I did the research on you and your profile, I saw that first you don't come from Melbourne in the first place. You come from you crossed Australia. Basically, you come from Western Australia, so Perth and the region of Perth. You did a Bachelor of Arts in Multimedia and Design. Most of your works were aiming towards visual mainly, right? Even if you already were into interaction, and you had, well, before entering the ALT control realm, you had a strong theme that was relationship between music and visual. I mean, it was all over your portfolio. How did you come to this theme in particular?
It probably would have been because of my background in music, and I also love listening to kind of film scores in particular, like movie soundtracks, and just kind of music being quite a large part of my life growing up as well. So when I did my design honors degree, I decided to focus on music visualization as my research topic. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I started off actually in the field of digital design, designing mainly for screens. So like designing websites, graphic design, video production, very much everything that I produced was kind of screen based until it got to a point where I was actually decided to move on from Perth and move to Melbourne to do a master's degree in animation games and interactivity. And that's really when I started delving more into like installation work and interactive work and creating things beyond the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you worked a bit on games, like serious games and e-learnings for like 4 or 5 years in Perth before moving to Melbourne. So you had a foot in the field somehow. We actually we saw some of your work was really interesting. You were on really serious and big projects for the basically the housing department of Australia, right? I don't know anything about politics in Australia, but it looked like a big thing. Like mistake was not an option for you on these projects, right?
Yeah, I worked in government for 8 years as a digital designer, and so the type of work is very different. Obviously, there are stakes involved, and the type of work is actually very very serious. There's still a bit of creativity that's allowed, but totally different to the type of work that I'm doing at the moment. And yeah, but I think that gave me a foundation as to kind of to brush up my multimedia and technical skills. But still, I think transitioning from screen-based media to installation work and playful hardware and alt controllers, like this is extremely new to me. And that type of work didn't really start till 2019 when I moved over.
Yeah, so, and for the audience to know, so when we say they cross the country, like it's not by Alistair and my standards. So he's in UK right now, I'm in France. we are talking Australia, so I think it's 3,500 kilometers, 1,200 and some miles. So basically, it's Los Angeles from Atlanta for the American audience to have a reference point. And before moving to your alt control work and installation-based work, let's talk about Chad. So you have some common points, like you come from digital arts too. And you started, well, you were doing like your bachelor in digital arts. You have a bachelor in media and communication, but we still are around design and this kind of stuff. And you did all this at the RMIT University, which is where, Helen, you did your master a few years ago, 2 years ago also. And I had one first simple question. How did you meet actually? Was it by this university, or is it the opposite? Like, did you hear about the university because of Chad? Or did you meet Chad at the university?
Oh, I actually met Chad at the parallel showcase that Free Play runs during Melbourne International Games Week every year. So I met him in 2017 when I came over from Perth just for Games Week, just to see what the community is like here, not knowing anything about it since I'm from Perth. And then when I got accepted into the master's program, I reached out to Chad just asking, oh, what do you think of RMIT? Like, you know, just to get some opinion before I actually accept the offer. And, you know, he highly recommended the university, and I thought, oh, okay, all right, I'll give it a go. And then we caught up for coffee, and just kind of, that's how we met. It's just chatting about games and interactive installation work. And yeah.
We had a 5-hour catch up / lunch where we just talked about everything video games and interactive art. It was a very good catch up.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's a good transition. Like, so Chad, you did your your bachelor at the RMIT University, and is that related to the Exertion Game Lab, where you did researches on out control installation based, but involving games?
Yeah. So the Exertion Games Lab was founded, I think, in 2011, which was in my third and final year of my undergrad at RMIT, and so I was one of the founding members of the lab. And I remember the director of the lab actually taught us in our first year at RMIT, and the name of the class, I think, was something like Radical Games. And it was the first time that I was exposed to games beyond keyboard and mouse. And it totally broadened my horizons. It was, you know, around the time when the Kinect and the Wii, you know, all the motion controller stuff had just started to kind of, you know, kick off. And part of the class was kind of talking about, oh, actually, you know, all of these new cool interfaces are coming about, but actually, here are some other stuff that exist, but also here's some examples of how these existing consumer products can be hacked and modified and used in different ways. And, you know, one of the examples that were given were, you know, JS Joust and a few others, and that just completely blew my mind. And I think it was possibly my first step into the world of alt controls and even like independent games, like the international indie games scene. If we imagine what that was like back in 2011 or whatever, I started to pay attention to the stuff that was happening internationally at that point.
For the audience, so the Exertion Game Lab is a game lab in Melbourne, I think. I'm talking under the supervision of Chad. And their research, so I'm quoting, the future of gaming of gaming with a focus on games that put the human body in the center of the experience. If you never had a look on their website, basically, if you enjoy scrolling through Shake That Button, you will love scrolling through all the projects made there because it's incredible. I've never heard of it before researching your past, let's say, and the number of projects, ALT control projects, installation-based projects, there is not only incredible, but they are all part of academic publication. So it's not just about making fun games. It's all about thinking about it. So it's insane, like that I never heard of this before. And indeed, the first project I saw from you, Chad, that was kind of out control like-ish, let's say, out control-ish, is Bubble Poppers. And it was part of your first research project at the Exertion Game Lab, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So Bubble Popper is the name of the project. It's a 2-player competitive, almost sports-like game where we have a projection on a flat, large wall. We're talking maybe 2 or 3 meters long. And it's for 2 to 4 players. And the game itself is very simple. We just have like 2 different colored bubbles that are just floating around, bouncing off of each other. And one player picks one color and then the other player picks another. And they have something like 60 seconds to try and pop as many bubbles as they can. And they do that by wearing this custom made oven mitt that we augmented and put some sensors and stuff inside it. So they wear them and then they just slap the wall and then the bubble will pop. And yeah, we made this back in 2011, and the technology we used back then was we had a Wiimote that picked up an infrared LED that was attached to the back of the oven mitt. And we had mapped the Wiimote to the computer, and each time the infrared LED lit up, it would register it as a mouse click on the computer. So it's very, very simple and hacked together. And for the oven mitt, we actually bought these like rubber calculators and then use that as like the switch, the sensor that you kind of press when you slap the wall. So yeah, it was a very fun project to put together.
We are showing a video of the game as you are explaining it, and we will do so for most games we'll talk about. That's a really nice, that's a really nice project to start with in ALT control. Like, it's not your usual simple my first arcade button games.
Yeah, the other thing about the other thing about the project was like one of the main reasons we created it back then was a lot of the physical games that were starting to emerge at the time really focused on having the players separated in their own little designated space. And that was mostly because of the technology. Like when we think of things like the Kinect or even motion control type stuff, a lot of the time the camera will not detect players if they're like in front of each other. So like emission kind of thing. And so we thought, oh, that's so unlike the way that we play physically in real life. And so Bubble Popper was an exploration of what does it mean if we all of a sudden allow the players to physically be able to, push and block the other player from popping bubbles. Is there a way that we can foster that sort of space in that environment? And that's kind of what Bubble Popper was exploring.
Fighting for a territory is a big part of both sports and physical game, outdoor games, sportive games. So not being able to do this because of technical problems was really frustrating. Technologies nowadays, I think I mean, at least for Kinect, it's a bit more intelligent somehow. Technologies are able to at least understand that players are overlapping. But back in 2011, just for the audience to I don't know if I have to remind this, but ALT control wasn't even a word, a term that existed back then. So it's incredible. But I have to admit, when I research into your profile, the project that really I was like in love with it was Cartload of Fun. I think it's because I will let you talk about it, but I think it's because it's the first time I actually see a project that is actually set up in a mean of transportation, of public transportation. I won't say more. I will let you talk about it, but I want to hear about this. Like, it's incredible. I didn't even know you did this, and it's incredible.
Yeah. So Cartload of Fun came about. It was my honors year. In 2012, I did it. I did my honors at RMIT, and I focused on designing games for unconventional play spaces. And one particular space that came to mind was public transport. At the time, I was really questioning where we play or how we play or with whom we play. And I really wanted to push at the boundaries of those questions and try and come up with weird and unconventional ways of playing. And at the time I was taking public transport, namely just trains, back and forth from uni. And every time I was in the space, I was just kind of observing what people were doing. The more time I spent in the space, the more I would begin to look at what other people were doing. And often it was not much. People treat that space as liminal space, a space that's
I'm sorry, so I'm laughing because literally that's the term I used this one just before the show to prepare the show with Alistair. I'm so happy you talk about liminal spaces, which is like, for me, I wanted you to talk about this. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just really excited and enthusiastic about this. So go on, liminal spaces and how we can use them in installation-based games.
Absolutely. So trains and trams and buses, these are not spaces that we enter to particularly be in that space. We use them as a transitional space, to get from point A to point B. And so often when people are in that space, they're either zoned out, resting, reading a book, on their phone. And one other thing that I noticed about this space was that it had its own set of social rules and social norms, no making eye contact, no talking in the space in particular. And yeah, it came with all of these like preconceived ideas of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act in that space. And so I thought, one day, it was like a busy day. The train was packed and I was heading home, and I was standing and holding on to the rail or the bar that you hold on to. And I kind of looked around and I had this urge to just shout out, "I spy with my little eye," and just start a game of that just to see what happens. But I never had the courage to actually start it. But it sparked an idea in me. I thought, oh, I wonder how the space would change if we suddenly introduced a game into it, whether people would behave differently, whether they would be annoyed, or whether they would then kind of join in and play. I really wanted to, in the most Bernie de Koven sense, turn the space into a playground.
Alistair knows I'm so happy you mentioned exactly. So, and now I can tell you, I didn't know if we could go further into details about this. So we will talk again about Bernie de Koven when we'll talk about street tape games, because I think the connection is we need to talk about this. We need to address this. But just to come back on liminal spaces. So it's very interesting. I had the same observation when it comes to judo. we have in the dojo, you can only start having a behavior that would be seen as hostile in the street. It's okay in the dojo if you wear your judo gi, tie your belt, bow to the mat, and then certain behaviors are accepted as part of, well, you are actually not only accepted, you are supposed to have them. The thing is, in a dojo, it allows you to do something. In public transportation, it's something that prevents you from doing stuff. So it's something that is somehow not dehumanizing, maybe it's not the term, but at least preventing you from having social interactions. So the fact that, and maybe it's not clear for the audience, but this game was actually in actual trains and trams, in the trams of Melbourne in 2012 and in Sydney's trains in 2013. So actual people taking just normal transport, not expecting something, actually played the game, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we had it on trams in 2012 and trains in Sydney in 2013. And the response was actually quite interesting. We had a wide variety of responses to it, and, ranging from people mostly just wanting to watch and see what happens to people actually enthusiastically wanting to play. And we would have moments where two complete strangers, the other thing about the game is it's a two-player collaborative game. And the way you play it is we attached force resistive sensors onto the bars that people hold onto and turn those into a controller. So to input into the game, all they would need to do is kind of squeeze the bar harder and softer, and that would be the input. And both, go ahead.
I guess, is that kind of, did you choose that because it's a way that people can interact with the game without needing to put themselves on the spot, without needing to look like they're taking part? Is that?
Absolutely. We wanted participation in the game to be as accessible as possible, not having to hold on to additional controllers, because the other thing about the space is that it's constantly starting and stopping. There's like moving and stuff involved. So we thought, okay, if people are already holding on to these bars, why not turn that into the controller? And yeah, the game itself is very simple. It's a collaborative game where both players hold on to both players control one character in the game. One player makes the character move left and right by squeezing and letting go. And the other player makes the character move up and down by squeezing and letting go. And so both players have to control the character and just collect these random gems that appear on the screen. And so that was the game. Very simple, very straightforward, but putting it in a space like that really changed the atmosphere. All of a sudden people were smiling and laughing and making eye contact. We would have two complete strangers playing the game and then high-fiving one another after that. People, I remember a kid coming in and going, "Oh, Mum, look, it's public art." And we had, I had this one very transformative experience with one particular gentleman that came on board. He was very reserved at first. He was like, he gave me this weird look and said, well, what's going on here? And I explained to him that, we were installing a game for everyone to play. Did you want to play along? And then he looked at me and he said, "I don't play games," in a very condescending way. But I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, this is kind of something different, and it hasn't happened before. Like, are you sure you just don't want to give it a go?" And then he thought for a moment, and he finally said, "All right, I'll play." And so I started to play with him, and as we played, his attitude started to change. He suddenly had a smile appeared on his face. He got like really into it. And when the game was over, he was like, "Oh, can we play again?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, let's go for it."
What a win! What a win! Like
That's fantastic.
there is no better win than this one. It's super interesting. I will move forward a bit in your story, let's say. So after that, you did a lot of games with the Exertion Game Lab, and not only with them. Actually, I'm thinking of some games the audience could find on Shake That Buttons. Actually, I'm thinking about dual reality, a digitally enabled physical sword fighting game with basically you can fight with someone physically. I mean that's the best way I can describe this, by mimicking what you're supposed to do. Exhausting jumping game, which was one of the 3 games you did for the Global Game Jam 2013. Somehow you made 3 games that year just for the Global Game Jam. Same jam you did Congratulations, which is a simple game about high-fiving people by the end of, and also a more, not out control game, but a more poetic game, Doki Doki. And then more games the same year. So 2013 was a hyper productive year for you. We have Salute, which is a game based on La Bise. It comes from my country. It's a competitive social kissing game. Kissing on the cheek, of course, not I mean, just kissing. Anyway, moving forward, Turnover, which is an installation-based game. And you ended 2013, I think, with The Whistler. So this game, I mean, was it your first experiment with urban games? Like, did it lead somehow to street tape games and such?
Yeah, so my first experience with urban games or pervasive games or street games, I think was in 2010. I attended Free Play, which is possibly the world's longest running independent games festival. And they hosted a session of JS Joust, Johann Sebastian Joust. And that was the first time that I actually was exposed to cool, little street games or folk games or physical games. And I think either that year or the year after that, Free Play brought over Tazos Stevens from Agency of Coney in London. And they do all sorts of street games and things like that. We had a company here in Melbourne called Pop-Up Playground, and they do all sorts of really cool and amazing physical games and like kind of urban games and things like that. And so I think a lot of my exposure to those sorts of games were through Free Play and Pop-Up Playground. I think Melbourne has a pretty long-standing history of playing and hosting those sorts of games. And so I began initially by playing them. And then I think by 2013, I was really interested in trying to make some as well. And I think, collaborating with local artists here in Melbourne kind of enabled me to kind of make those experiences come to life.
Yeah, Free Play runs since 2004, I think. So it's a really it's old for an independent game festival. It's like super old. There are like OGs of events, even worldwide. I mean, not just in Australia. And I think it's the biggest festival in Australia for independent games. We introduced you by saying that you're currently the director. You weren't back then. It's more recent, not that recent, like some years now.
2017, yeah.
2017. Okay, so you start to be comfortable in the role, I guess, of director of Free Play Festival. We'll come to this. Just finishing about your out control work. So what the audience is seeing right now is a video of The Whistler, which is a live horror game that was set in Melbourne's gardens, to put it simply. And it looked like a lot of fun. I don't think it's still playable right now.
Oh, sorry, I just switched it off.
Okay, so what you just saw was that. And just to finish on your solo game, so we can talk about Helen's games after that. You did some experiments with VR, which have a common point. You use VR the way no one is using VR. That's your way of doing VR games. It looks like it, at least. The first one was actually made for the IndieCade's 2014 3D Jam, so a game jam organized by the IndieCade. It was, so I'm not sure, Dual Cyan. Do you pronounce it that way?
Oh, I pronounce it Dulcion.
Dual Cyan. So it was a mix of lip motion and VR, a puzzle game for two persons to play. And the second one was, this is not a VR game. 3 years later, this one is a game in VR without any visuals and actually without having the headset actually plugged into a computer. So it's just the headset by itself. So how did you come up with the idea of what can I do with VR that is what everyone else is not doing with VR?
Yeah. So I think one of my philosophies as a game designer is to push at the boundaries of the medium, but also think really hard about what mark I'm leaving behind. And I try and not make things that have already been done before. And so I think about what hasn't been done. And I think with VR, one of the things with Dulcion, the thing that we tried to explore was, it was kind of twofold. One was a two-player VR experience. And like we're seeing more of that now, but like this is years and years and years ago when we still had the first Oculus development, the first DK1 Oculus development kit headset. We made a two-player game where you would try and solve puzzles by picking up objects and placing them and touching things. We had a leap motion attached to the front of the VR headset, and so it could detect your hands. But the twist was we swapped the leap motion devices so that when you raise your hand, it's not you that sees it, it's the other player. And so they see your hands and they have to direct you to the left and then to the right and then pick up the object. And you have to do the same for them. And so it's this back and forth, like social puzzle solving game. And with this is not a VR game. At that point, I was a bit worried about VR becoming a platform mostly for rich people, you know, like people who can afford these $1,000 headsets. And I was very critical of the platform overall. And I thought, oh, how cool would it be to use a VR headset, but not really use a VR headset? So we designed, it was just me. I designed an experience that was audio only. And so for the whole duration of the game jam, I just recorded my voice speaking. And the experience is a player sits down, puts the headset on, puts headphones on, and then I press play on the MP3 player. And then, they're also holding motion controls, which are also not attached because the lights are not on or anything. And it's a performative game that's supposed to be performed in front of an audience. And so the audience is watching, expecting, you know, the player to play this VR game. But when the experience starts, all the player hears is my voice. There's like nothing on the screen, and they hear my voice and I say, hello and welcome to the experience. Don't be alarmed if you see nothing on the screen, because actually there is nothing to see. And the whole game is you and I trying to convince the audience that you're playing a VR game.
That's brilliant.
And so from there, I just kind of give them instructions. I thought of every kind of cliche VR experience kind of gesture or whatever that they can perform. You know, I said, oh, okay, imagine you're kind of in a boxing ring and you start punching and then now fly like a bird and now you're driving a car and, you know, archery, like anything that I can think of that would kind of be performed in VR, I just threw in there. And so the whole time the audience is watching going, what is going on in there? Because there's also no screen for the audience to watch the game being experienced. And then at the very end, I say, okay, now bow to the audience and take off the VR headset and go, wow, that was an amazing experience. And then so they do that. And then we play the game again a second time, but this time instead of it being on headphones, it would be on loudspeakers so that the audience is in on it. And so yeah, that was this is not a VR game.
That's brilliant.
That's brilliant.
When you do it the second time round, you know, have some of the audience twigged what's going on, or like how many people figure it out? How many people like are just completely fooled?
I think we probably had an audience of maybe 20 people when we first performed it. I think maybe out of the 20, maybe something like 2 or 3 probably picked up on what was actually going on. Yeah. But then, yeah, when we played it on the loudspeakers, I think everyone got it and had a good laugh after that.
Fascinating, right?
Just before moving on to Helen's story, you started directing free play. I think that's what you're mainly known for. I mean, I have to admit, first I knew Chad Toprak, the director of free play. Like, it's the first thing that people know from you. So free play is, the submissions just ended for free play, and the event is in June. You have some stuff planned for online streaming of some sort? Okay, so maybe it's the good time to make a shout out about it. So people should join in June.
So the dates are 8th to the 13th of June, and our whole conference program will be streamed online.
Cool. So Helen, your story with installation and ALT control is a bit more recent, but you compensated by being very active in the past 2 years, basically, or 3 years with it. So the first game I think you made that was really like part of the ALT control movement, recognized as such, at least, so maybe it's not the first one, was 100 Ghost Stories, I guess, made in 2019. And well, it's fascinating, so I will let you talk about it. How did you come up with this idea? So it's based on something, a tradition, a Japanese tradition. So maybe you can talk about this better than I will.
Yeah, so 100 Ghost Stories is an interactive book installation, and it's based on a very, very old Japanese parlor game called 100 Ghost Stories. And the idea is that a group of friends would gather in a dark room and share ghost stories with one another. And after every story, there'll be 100 kind of candles lit in the room. After every story, you would extinguish a candle flame. So as you progress, as more stories are told, the room actually gets darker. And there's a rumor that when the final candle is extinguished, a spirit is summoned. And so I first knew about this whole parlor game from actually Hokusai's prints. He did a series of prints based on this experience in Japan. Hokusai is like a very famous Japanese printmaker. He did the Great Wave. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it. And yeah, that's right. And so I really wanted to kind of translate that experience of that parlor game into an installation, and that's how 100 Ghost Stories came about. It's basically there's a physical book on a book stand, and I use kind of light projection to project animated ghost stories onto the book. So it's kind of like the book comes alive, it's haunted. And at the end of every animation, every ghost story, there's a projected candle flame, and people have to kind of physically close their hand over the candle flame to trigger the next ghost story. And that uses like a leap motion device to detect the hand closing. And then after I only animated 3 stories for the installation itself, and then after the 3rd animation, you close your hand and like a whole myriad of ghosts would kind of come out of the book, flying out of the book in the projection, and that's kind of the end of the experience. Yeah,
That's gorgeous. The audience can see the video right now, and it's a beautiful game. I will make a jump without, so I won't talk directly about jump, jump, bend. So I will make a jump, and because not even a year later, you actually made another game that is based on traditional Japanese culture, and I insist on tradition because a lot of people will be interested in mangas and animes, but actually traditional Japanese culture has a lot to offer. Of course, I'm thinking about Sashiko. It's a game you first made for the Global Game Jam 2020. A brilliant game. It's a game I often use as a reference for my students in HCI Applied to Game Design, just for you to know. So you are part of my classes for a year now. So maybe that's a good transition to talk about this meditative sewing game.
Yeah, so Shiko came about, like you said, for the Global Game Jam, and the theme for that year was repair. So I would probably consider Sashiko to be my first proper control game, actually using kind of electronics. And never done anything like this before. I had no idea what I was doing. And it uses a makey. In fact, like it's actually not very complex. It's actually very simple, the idea. And so what Sashiko is, it's a meditative sewing game where people actually use a physical kind of sewing board as an input. They have to physically use a needle and thread to actually sew patterns into this board, and it's detected using a makey, and the game's made in Unity. And I created this game alongside my programmer, Tabitha. And and so that's pretty much it. It's a very, very simple game. And it was my first time doing anything that's kind of alt control related. And the makey was a very kind of a piece of hardware that's like very easy to get into. It's pretty much plug and play. And basically just uses kind of keyboard presses as detection. And so all the user has to do is just kind of follow the patterns and sew. And it's supposed to be a very relaxing kind of experience, not like a competitive thing. Even if they don't sew the pattern that's displayed on the screen, that's totally fine as well. And I think, and I think there was a lot of positive feedback because people just was like, how is this done? Like, how do you get that pattern that's on the sewing board onto the screen? And it's actually a very simple process.
Yeah, the reason I'm using it for my students is that I think it's a perfect example of how elegant design has nothing to do with the complexity of the technical part. Quite the opposite, actually. A brilliant designer for me is someone that can do a lot with very few techniques, and this is what really struck me in your profile. Not to say that you don't do technical stuff now, but you're such a great designer, and that you were able to do already kind of incredible stuff, even when technically you never heard of Arduino, or at least never tried anything Arduino related. So that's why it's such a good example, and I'm using it this week to give a class this week on out control. But in between 100 Ghost Stories and Sashiko, you made a surprising Kinect controlled game, a cooperative rhythm game, Jump Jump Bend, with very elegant graphics, and it was also like rooted in traditional outdoor playground games. So we can feel like a street tape games vibe already somehow. Maybe you can talk about this a bit.
Yeah, so Jump Jump Band came about because I think I was very drawn to the traditional kind of playground and children games that I used to play as a kid. So I was like, oh, what can I do with this? And I did a poll. I remember reaching out on social media to like all my kind of connections saying, what's your favorite playground game when you were a kid? And surprisingly, skipping or jump rope actually came out to be quite popular. I think it was like in the top 5 games. And I thought, oh yeah, jumping. Yeah, like, and then I started thinking like, when you're like kind of skipping, you're almost like already skipping to a beat. There's like a regular rhythm to it. I was like, oh, what if I combine jump rope with a music rhythm game? And so Jump Jump Bell was actually my first time using Unity. I've like never used Unity before. I think you'll find there's a trend in the way that I work is that I like to do a whole variety of things. I don't really specialize in one single thing. And my approach to my projects is that it's always concept first, technology second. I don't really specialize in one particular piece of technology. So it was my first time using Unity, probably not the greatest project to be my first Unity game. But
that's what I was about to say. Like, starting Unity with a Kinect project.
I don't know what I was thinking.
But it works. I mean,
it was. I mean, I did spend an incredible amount of time just trying to get it work, and I had a lot of help from my lecturers as well. I'm very, very thankful that I had a lot of support around me to make this happen. So yeah, and decided, okay, well, I need to make a jumping game. I guess I need body tracking. So, try the Kinect. So first time using Kinect as well. And ended up creating this game where people kind of jump to the beats of the music and they work together to create a high score. Again, very simple concept, but what I was really interested in is kind of the social interaction between the players and the physical movement, and kind of going back to that kind of the feeling of playing childhood and playground games together.
Connecting players is something that we can see in both your works. Not only players between with other players, but also with the environment, which is obviously my transition to segue to Her Tree. Was that smooth? Not really, but it was a transition. So Her Tree is like such a poetic experience when you read about it, because I didn't experience it myself. So it looks like such a poetic experience, also connected to Australia somehow, which is really interesting. I don't know anything about this topic, so I will just shut up and let you talk about how you came up with Her Tree.
Yeah, so Heart Tree was kind of my first foray into kind of urban play / public installation art type games or interactive work. And it's basically a tree installation that people can interact with to connect to the Indigenous and natural histories of a particular suburb in Melbourne called Brunswick. And so it's a type of work that I think I wanted people to feel like their connection to land and country as well. And they do that by physically touching the tree trunk, kind of like they're feeling the heartbeat of the tree, and also touching the ropes that kind of hang from the branches of the tree. And when they touch, different soundscapes play, and you can also have like multiple players kind of playing at the same time to create different types of layered soundscapes. And that was, that very much the content of the soundscapes was pretty much drawn from the actual history of Brunswick, the natural history of Brunswick. It used to be a hunting ground for the Indigenous people that lived there. There's also, stuff that was happening in the natural environment, like floods and bushfires and all that. And so it was very much a connection back to nature and also connection to land. And the idea is that, what if every tree had a story to tell, and it's through your connection with the tree that you can kind of, it reveals its past stories to you. Yeah.
So you had a lot of researches to do on the past of both the people and the place before coming up with a game like this, I assume.
Yeah, that's right. We did site visits, we did field research. I went to the Brunswick Library and did a lot of local history research there as well. Yeah, and it was also my first time. Second time. Sashiko was the first time. So Hartree was pretty much followed from Sashiko, and it's kind of cemented my interest in alt controllers, because all of the custom controllers in Hartree was actually made from scratch. So I had kind of woven the actual tree trunk wrap from scratch, from twine and paper raffia and strings and rope, and braided the ropes myself. And it was actually a lot of fun crafting the controllers. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. And yeah, I mean, alt control have so much to bring, much more than just fun. Fun is only a small part of what alt control is able to do. Time is running, so of course from here I'd like to talk about street tape games. I mean, I have to. This is incredible. I had a real strong new games vibe. So Bernie the Coven's work vibe in it, rethinking social relationship at a moment like this. I mean, amidst the pandemic and such, is not only cool, but actually, I don't know if it's necessary, but at least very welcome. I really want to play games like this. So we have a short introduction of you, Helen, during Gaia, introducing the concept. But maybe you can enter a bit more into the details, and especially the social part, social aspect of this concept.
Yeah, so like I said in the video, street tape games pretty much came about because of COVID, and I think I really, during the pandemic, I really missed that kind of playing games and that social interaction in public space. I remember when I ventured out onto the streets during COVID, especially during lockdown as well in Melbourne. We went through 2 lockdowns last year.
It was pretty intense.
Yeah. And I just saw there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear when people were kind of interacting with each other in public space. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to work on a project that kind of allowed people to kind of overcome that fear, and what other better way than playing with each other. So that's kind of how street tape games came about. And in a safe way by incorporating social distancing. So the whole project is about redesigning kind of traditional playground, street, children's games, but incorporating social distancing and taking the touch element out of it. Yeah, did you want anything else to add?
Sums it up pretty well.
So I invite the audience to, after the show, to look at streettape.games. I will add the link by the end of the show, because just the pictures, in the pictures you can feel the playfulness, and not seeing pictures taken recently like this when you come from the alt control movement is, I mean, it's refreshing to see some people in the sun playing with each other with a smile on their face. I mean, I didn't actually realize before looking at this project how much I missed it. But it's time to talk about the most recent project we didn't talk about. One that you made during the Amaze at Home Jam. I had the privilege of, privilege is the French way of saying this, the opportunity to, the great chance to organize. You came up with an idea that is awesome, and that you bring with you, that is not exactly working right now, until very recently. So we'll show
I've got a video queued up so the audience can see it with the lights on.
Perfect.
And then you can we'll get to see it, I guess, in its physical form, albeit without working lights.
So
There it is.
first the video, and then you can show us the actual device. The video is like 40 seconds long. It will be short.
There it is. Switch the sound on.
This is a game that was made in a few days.
It's a really lovely design. Like, well, would you like to show us the equipment? I'm really excited to see this.
COVID-19.
Like
The coronavirus
yeah.
pandemic has brought enormous change.
So there it is. There it is.
You did it in 2 days, not even 2 days, actually. 2 days.
Not
was,
even 2 days.
Yeah,
Wow.
because it was 2 days was the whole jam. So basically, I'd say maybe 24 hours of real production, pure production. If you don't count design, the intro, the stuff at the end. So 24 hours, and that's a competitive game of paint mixing. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain it?
Before you explain it, Alistair, we have to ask the audience
Yes.
for words, and we forget every time. So
Yes, we do always forget to do this this is the third time we've done this bit on the show, and the third time where we've
never
forgotten
learn.
to introduce it. So after after we get to have a look at and play around with the paint buckets, we'll be inviting Helen and Chad to come up with a new concept for a game controller or alternative controller game, using objects suggested by you, the audience. So from now on, if anybody in the audience types something into chat beginning with an exclamation mark, that will be added to the pool of objects from which they will be asked to create something. So if you type in exclamation mark funny hat, then they might need to make a game involving funny hats. That is there for you, audience, to throw whatever you can into the toolbox, and we'll see what they come up with at the end of the show. I guess.
But for now, yeah, PaintMixer 3000. How does it work?
Yes, so it's a 2-player game where each player has to kind of have these kind of 3 dials, red, green, and blue. And what they have to do is kind of, there's a randomly generated color, the middle paint bucket here, that would come up with a randomly generated color. And then the idea is that you hide it first. So you have to memorize the color, and the 2 players have to turn their dials to try and match that color, the red, green, and blue dials. And then you press the button again to reveal it and just laugh at how ridiculously off you are. I think that's the funny part of it, is that you can't actually see the color you're mixing as you go because it's turned off. And the funny part is when you actually reveal it and see how close and how off you are to the target paint bucket. Yeah.
I mean,
We were very inspired by this this TikTok a series of TikTok videos where the TikToker would combine different colors of paint into like a paint bucket of predominantly like white paint, and then it'd be a bit of red, a bit of green, a bit of yellow, sorry, a bit of red, and then you would try and figure out what color you'd end up with by the time the machine had finished kind of mixing it together. And then there'd be the final reveal where they opened the paint bucket and you'd be totally off or something.
Right.
That was kind of what we were inspired by.
Wow.
Okay, so someone in the audience actually guessed it. I think it's Johnny Hopkins that was part of the same game jam. That actually said we need more games based on TikTok videos and trends, and I agree.
Yes.
Any chance we could have a glimpse under the hood of the installation? Like, how did you make it? Because 24 hours to do so much, only the two of them, and especially, I mean, we weren't in the same time zones, so
Oh.
I don't.
It's a mess.
It's very messy.
Okay, cool. The same. We have the same kind of mess after a jam, so I'm
I have to
like
say
reassured.
that I mean, as messes go, that looks relatively tidy as messes go. Like I've got shoeboxes filled with wires that I mean that I would be scared to even open because it would dislodge something. But I guess so. I see you've got the 3 dials on each side connected in, and it's like what is inside the buckets? Is that like a single
just
LED or is it a group of LEDs?
It's a NeoPixel ring.
Oh right.
Okay.
Ah.
Oh, okay.
That's really
Even I
interesting because
didn't know.
like the way it reflects up on the white lining on the inside, like on the video, it really does look like glowing paint, glowing like toxic goo or something. I mean, toxic's not the right word, but you know what I mean, like radioactive or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, this is just you know, spray paints. It's just
Yeah.
the cap on
Oh,
top of
right.
the spray paints. I just
Okay.
grab them and use them for the paint buckets.
That's
And
fascinating.
and then it's just a bit of decoration around it. So using just black cardboard and putting white paper around it.
Yeah.
Is actually pretty simple.
Yeah, it has white paper with black paper with cutout that kind of looks like dripping paint.
Oh, that's clever. I
That's
was
so
about to
clever,
ask
yeah.
when I saw them like that, I thought you'd painted white on the outside, and I was like, but I swear on the video it was the same light up color as the paint on the inside. So I mean, that's a nice little bit of genius there.
Yeah, and the white reflects the color and the black doesn't, and so it gives that effect of like the color's kind of dripping out of it.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it works. Yeah, like that's such a smart way of doing this.
I love how you describe it as smart, and like most of the time we just have no idea. I just have no idea what I'm doing.
So I mean,
It works out at the end. So
was it like these kind of solutions for okay, how are we going to do the light and the color? And that was just totally improvised on the spot. There wasn't like you'd played around
I think that's
with.
very much. No, that's very much the nature of game jams. It's just that you just improvise and just grab whatever materials are around you and just try and it just somehow works. So yeah, by chance it just kind of worked.
That's amazing. I mean, one of the things I really love about it is like the kind of skill that you're asking of from the players, because that thing of memorizing and imagining and picturing something in your head, that is an interesting thing to do, but to visualize in your mind a color and then anticipate what combination of colors, like that is a really it's a soft skill. It's a it's a really unusual soft skill that I don't think any of us are ever asked to draw on in our real lives. So I guess anyone has the same opportunity to be equally kind of good or bad at it.
Absolutely. Even artists who use tools like Photoshop, all they really do is pick a color on the gradient spectrum. They're not really having to add a bit of R and a bit of G and a bit of B to come up with a color. It's a very fun and playful way of guessing a color.
I remember we had a discussion when we were making this game whether to continuously show the color as you're mixing or hide it. And in the end, we went with hiding it because I think the reveal at the end is actually a really important part of the game as well. The dramatics of revealing.
And it's not really about winning or losing either. It's there's just a fun playfulness to it as you're revealing the colors and seeing how close or how totally off you were with it. I think that in itself is very rewarding.
Yeah, I guess the sense that failing at the game feels as positive and as exciting as winning at the game Is,
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
there's a lot of joy in that.
How many words do we have, Alistair?
So how many words do we have in the toolbox? Honestly, I don't know. I have lost count, but we have got
A lot.
yeah, we do
The
have
number
a lot.
is a lot.
I can yep.
Okay, so
We have
maybe
well, Helen and Chad, are you ready to see what objects have been selected for you by the audience? Then I
Yes.
shall press.
We're a little nervous.
Yeah. Well, brace yourselves for an exciting time. We have a cello bow, a pair of tongs, a cello, the stuffed animal behind them, and a coffee cup. So, what do you see? What does this conjure up?
you can talk between yourselves, and by the end we need a pitch, a game pitch, a short game.
Okay.
Well, obviously, I mean, there's obviously the connection between the cello and the cello bow.
Or is there?
The stuffed
that too
animal
easy?
behind us.
What kind of is that? Is
The
it a
stuffed
husky?
animal. Yeah. His name is
They're
Momo.
not sure.
A coffee cup, okay, and tongs.
Coffee cup, I guess, because of the connection to Melbourne. Melbourne's a very big coffee city. so-
Right. I didn't know that. We must have a.
Tongs.
Yeah, we definitely knew that, and it's all planned like this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a lot of Melbourne knowledge in the chat tonight. That's
Absolutely.
Mm.
And in our brains, absolutely.
Well, I kind of want to have the cello as like the main kind of alt control bass thing.
Yep.
And kind of want to use the tongs as like part of like the conductive element. And maybe you don't use the cello bow directly with the cello. Maybe the tongs come into play somehow. I don't know how, but
like as in plucking the strings.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
so maybe you balance the cello bow on the cello somewhere while our stuffed animal Momo holds onto the tongs and plucks on the cello while Helen and I are sipping coffee from our coffee cup.
So is the stuffed animal being controlled by someone, or is it alive like in Toy Story? I mean, or is it alive? It could, I might not know. It might be alive like in Toy Story in real life.
Well, maybe it comes alive as we're sipping our coffee cup, trying to think of new ideas. Somehow in the background, it's like it's playing the theme song to our thinking and sipping of coffee.
what I think might be interesting, although, is the player actually holding a cup of coffee in one hand, and they only have one other hand to do whatever they need to do, play the cello or whatever. It reminds me of when we see people playing table tennis is in a public space near where we live. But they're always holding an ice cream in one hand and playing ping pong with the other. And I'm just like, how do they do that? It's like an added challenge of eating ice cream and playing table tennis. Maybe the coffee cup is like a thing where you have to balance your coffee while
as you're playing
the cello.
Or the cello only plays for the duration that you sip your coffee.
Yeah, I mean, have we used all of this stuff?
I guess.
Okay, so what's the final pitch?
Yeah.
Gosh. What do you want to go with?
Up to you. What do you
Well, I still think the us sipping coffee and Momo playing the soundtrack to us thinking is a pretty good pitch. But it only plays for the duration that we're sipping the coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like it. It's like a kind of it's almost like you could put that in a gallery. You know, two creators thinking while a stuffed animal plays the cello, but only while they're sipping the coffee. Like, I mean, I could see that in the Tate Modern or something like that. Museum of Modern Art. Like, if anyone in the audience is from like a major art gallery, Chad Toprak and Helen Kwok, they're in here. You message here, get their email addresses. Like, send them. Like, I mean, how much will it cost to get you in to perform your brand new installation?
What do you think? How much do cellos cost?
It depends. I mean, they could be quite expensive.
We're saying the order of millions or something. Is that
great?
Yeah,
we're happy
$1 million. Great. Well, that's cool. That's a cool game. I'm trying to make a Photoshop out of it to put on Twitter later. If the audience has a question, that's a good moment to ask it, because in a few minutes, I think we will come to an end.
But meanwhile, is there anything Chad and Toprak that Chad and Toprak, Chad and Helen,
Chad and Toprak and Helen and Kwok, do you have anything to add?
that you'd like to tell us? I mean,
what is the rest of your stuff?
What is next for you, and what's coming up? Or is there more that you'd like to show us? Like,
it was just the stuff that this was
Ashiko.
Oh,
hold on.
So what kind of fabric is that? That it's oh wow.
It's just denim.
Oh right.
It's just denim. Yeah. It's actually made from a denim bag that I just cut out and put a piece of cardboard into, and the actual needle inputs are actually the backs of earrings. So I just bought a pack of like 10 earring inserts, like the backs of them, and just like use them in the thing. That's as brilliant. The conductive input. Yeah, a lot of it is just kind of because it's made in a game jam as well. Like a lot of the time, it's just kind of making do with what I have. Yeah, so that's the Ashiko. That's the heart tree.
Oh wow!
It's all hand woven. It's pretty impressive.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess that like the hand woven nature of it. I guess when you're talking about, you know, this is a piece about connection. It's a piece about, you know. It's a connection to the world, connection to each other, like, and so being able to touch something that has been physically created by a human being and made out of natural materials, I guess that really speaks to that.
Absolutely, you're exactly right. Like the focus was using like natural materials because of that connection to nature. So you're spot on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and this is just another one that I made for uni. It's called I Spy in the Dark.
Wow.
It's a paper diorama. But basically the idea of the game is that you play it in the dark with a flashlight. And there's a storybook that Chad and I had written where every page of the story, there's a hidden object that you have to find in the paper diorama using your torch. And it's a hark back to when you were a kid. Sometimes you would read books under the bed covers with a torch, and it's kind of trying to capture that moment of childhood.
That's amazing. And these are all are they hand cut?
Yes, they were hand cut. Because I made this during lockdown and all of the maker spaces were closed.
Yeah.
And I originally wanted to just like laser cut it just to save time, but because it was during the second lockdown of Melbourne, I had to hand cut them myself.
Right. But that's, I mean, it's, I guess, like, I feel like there's a kind of, like, a real strong sense of atmosphere in, you know, the work that you're doing, you know, be it the sort of the kind of the sort of gentle contemplative atmosphere of the heart tree, or you've got this, which is a kind of spooky curiousness with the torch. Like, I think that torch as an object is such a lovely thing for evoking that, but also like the work that you did with the book, the 100 Ghost Stories, like, has that same kind of spooky kind of quality about it. It's just, the low light bringing you in. I mean, it's a very is atmosphere something that you kind of consciously think about, or is this something that just kind of emerges naturally?
I think it just emerges. I don't think I was consciously thinking about it. I think it just kind of emerges from the concept and also the project itself. But I think, I'm usually led by the concept. I think that is my creative process, and my creative practice is that it's concept first. And then everything kind of flows on from that, like what technology I use, what media I use, how I'm going to create it. I don't know, what about you? What's your creative process like?
Oh, I think concept first for me as well. Absolutely. I think I'm mostly driven by thinking about what's not been tried and tested before, and kind of subverting what's already present, kind of critiquing platforms and tools and things like that. I'm just very interested in using games and technology in weird and different ways.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly rings true for the work that we've seen tonight. Like, repurposing a train, repurposing I think that using the Kinect with the hand tracking is just this wonderful, like, combination of using things for the purpose that they give, the things that they give you, but not the things that they were created to do in such a way, is a sort of, I think that's a really nice kind of challenge, to the audience, to the people who make these things, or whoever it may be, to say come at this from a different angle. I think it's wonderful. So I'm checking to see if we have any questions from the audience. And
no, but I have one. What's the name of the cat? What's the name of the
His name is Aslan.
Aslan. Okay.
Yeah. So it's Turkish for lion, and I have a Turkish background.
Yeah, I know you actually speak Turkish, right?
Yes, that's right.
wow.
Aslan, so I think if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap it up. Do you agree, all of you? Okay, cool. So thanks a lot, Chad. Thanks a lot, Helen. You can kiss Aslan for us. It was a pleasure having you with us, and I can't wait to look at Free Play this year and watch the streaming from Paris. Thanks again for waking up that early. I'm gonna call it tonight, and meanwhile your day will start. Alistair, I think you have some announcement to make, right?
That's right. So we have just a couple of days. I mean, it's a couple of days, one day maybe even. I guess it depends what time zone you're in, how many days are left. The late submissions for IndieCade this year close on April the 30th. So that is Friday. So if you go to indiecade.com/submissions, this is your opportunity to submit games for the festival. I can highly recommend doing this. I have shown work at IndieCade myself, and it has been a fantastic experience. And they are very receptive of alternative controller games, playable theatre, installations, and of course traditional games with screens and joypads and keyboards and mice and things like that as well. So that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you very much for joining us, Chad and Helen.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
And thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Au revoir.
Bye. And I got to stop. And oh, that's us off the air. I don't know why I was taking my